It is just about time for us to get started. We are on lesson 152. We're coming up to the end of a quarter pretty soon. I think we will have 4 lessons remaining after this one. Excuse me. Excuse me. So we'll have more updates about that coming hopefully in the next week or so as as I and the other 2 on the curriculum committee are getting a lot of those details sorted out and squared away for quarter 4. As I said, lesson 152 will be in Numbers 11 and 12, but before we get into the material, Fletcher's going to lead us in a prayer.
Dear Lord, we thank you for this opportunity to come together to learn about you. Pray that you be with Jeremy as he leads the class, along with the other teachers, with the students, that we are locked in, put in practice what we learned today. Be with Dave, those that are expecting, and Devin as well. In Christ's name, I pray.
Who wants to get it started with the memory verse? Conversation between them going here. Memory verse, anyone? Right?
I will walk among you, will be your God. Leviticus 26:12. Leviticus 26:12.
26:12. Okay, I wasn't sure if I heard that last bit, but thank you. Very good. Okay. So who can give us a recap of what we discussed on Sunday back in chapters 1 through 4 of Numbers? Yeah.
Well, I wasn't in here. I was teaching kids, but basically we talked about the tabernacle being in the center of all the Israelites and Levites, and the numbering of them and where they were placed around,
Okay.
and
so-
why, and what
Yeah. So there's some kind of surprising lessons that we could find in that, and we really picked into the details. Gary?
It's mostly also the numbering of the men that
Right.
were able to go to war.
Mhm.
You know, and
Yeah, once again, even with that, as we look at the criteria for the numbering, both of the Israelites and then separately the Levites, not that they're not Israelites, but that they're not counted among the military strength for reasons, and there were things that we could learn from that as well. So we've got the census and all of its details, the arrangement of the camp, as well as the arrangement when they're on the march, which is tied to the arrangement of the camp, of course. And essentially, this just is a reflection of God's organization of the polity of the Israelites, and how it's all directed, it's all intended to be centered on God. That's, the tabernacle is in the center of the camp, the tabernacle is in the center when they're on the march. There are strategic, sort of defensive reasons for that, but that's not the only reason for it. It's also because it's supposed to be at the center of their lives as well. Okay, so that we're gonna jump over several chapters, and then we come to chapter 11, and I want to preface this by saying that the latter portion of chapter 10 records when the Israelites leave Mount Sinai. So for quite some time now, when we have been studying the Israelites, it's been at the foot of Mount Sinai. They've been there for a long time, right about, I think, the same amount of time that we have been studying them in that location. So remember, they arrived there, I think, about 3 months after 3 months? 3 weeks. I'm getting myself turned around here, but a while after they left Egypt, they arrived at Mount Sinai, and then they finally erect the tabernacle at a year after they have left Egypt, or just shy of it. And then about a month or so after they, in fact, I think it took a month and a half after they erect the tabernacle is when God says, all right, now it's time. We've been here for quite a while. We've set up a tabernacle. We have organized the people. We've organized the organization. Doesn't make any sense. We've organized the worship, the Levites, the all of these different things. I've given you laws. I've told you how to behave toward each other, toward yourselves, toward me, toward outsiders. All of these things we've taken care of. I've given you everything that we need that you need to know. Now, pack up. It's time to get out of here. We're moving on to the next phase, the next part, the next chapter of the story, we might have said. So, with all of that said, let's jump right into chapter 11. I don't remember where we left off reading. Valerie, can you take verses 1 through 3, please? Numbers 11.
And the people complained in the hearing of the Lord about their misfortunes. And when the Lord heard it, his anger was kindled, and the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some outlying parts of the camp. Then the people cried out to Moses, and Moses prayed to the Lord, and the fire died down. So the name of that place is called Terahah, because the fire of the Lord burned among them.
All right, thank you. So, it doesn't seem like things are starting particularly well. What did the Israelites have to complain about at this stage? Mallory? I'm sure you're thinking the same thing that I am. It's like our kids. What do they need something to complain for? They're going to come up with something. Yeah, there's always something that's not just perfect, just exactly the way that they wanted it or expected it to be. The only thing that is said about it here is verse 1, their misfortunes. What does that mean? I don't know. We could make some suggestions, but it's not clear. One way or another, they have some things that they're not happy about, and as they have just finally gotten on the move, they're finally leaving Sinai, and they are, surprise, surprise, complaining. Now,
The way I explained it to the kids when we were going over this is like, they literally pulled out of the driveway, and before they could turn the car into drive, they were complaining about, oh, we do that.
yeah, that's a really good
That's
analogy.
really what it was. It's like they literally just started going, and you're already like, the trip hasn't even started yet. You haven't walked more than 5 feet.
And very often when that sort of thing happens, as parents, we want to just say, all right, I'm pulling right back into that driveway, and you go inside, I'm not dealing with this. And that's essentially God's approach to it as well. I'm not dealing with this. So he immediately sends fire to burn some of the camp, right?
And what she just described as something on a very small scale,
Yeah.
a family of 6 or so. You're talking about 600,000 people here. You know, some people are complaining, hey, we didn't stay long enough, we left too early. I mean, they had all kinds of things or reasons that they could complain, just like any large group. Some going to complain this way, some going to complain that way. And you're really not going to get everybody very happy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, you're talking a large group of people, you're going to find some complaining.
It's always somebody's turn to be upset about something or other. All right, let's keep reading. Jacob, can you take Numbers 11, verses 4 through 9, please?
Now the rabble that was among them had a strong craving, and the people of Israel also wept again and said, oh, that we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt that cost nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our food is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at. Now the manna was like coriander seed, and its appearance like that of
Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah.
Delium.
the delium. The people went about and gathered it and ground it in hand mills, or beat it in mortars, and boiled it in pots and made cakes of it. And the taste of it was like the taste of cakes baked with oil. When the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell with it.
All right, thank you. So verses 7 through 9, it seems like it's not word for word, but it's pretty close to a word for word rehash of God's description of manna back in Exodus chapter, I think it's in chapter 16. And there's a reason for that, but let's answer number 1. What did the rabble among the Israelites desire?
Meat.
Meat. They want meat, okay? Something besides the manna that God has been providing for them. I mean, they almost come right out and say that. There's nothing at all but this manna to look at. So Okay.
Well, didn't murmuring start from, I guess I'd say non-Israelites?
Yeah, so let's talk about that for a moment. The ESV says rabble, which is a perfectly good translation. Is anybody else reading different translation that says something different? Andrew?
Riffraff.
Oh, okay, riffraff. Yeah, well, that's synonymous. What else? What do we have? Anybody who's reading maybe the New King James?
I am, but I'm trying, what verse is it?
Verse
Four.
4.
Oh, mixed
The
multitude.
mixed multitude. That's right. So that's the same word in Hebrew that's used back in Exodus chapter 12, verse 38, describing as the Israelites are leaving Egypt. It says, 600,000 men on foot, et cetera, et cetera. Also, a mixed multitude went up with them. What? And the only interpretation that really makes any sense there is that there are others, non-Israelites, who have been observing this situation with the Israelites and the 10 plagues and the way that Pharaoh and the Egyptians have handled it, and now the way that Moses and the Israelites have handled it, and they're going, I want to be with them. Things are not going so hot under your reign. I'm gonna follow them because things seem to be better. They seem to have God's protection, and you guys don't, clearly. So there are a fair number of Gentiles who go up along with the Israelites. And now it's the same word here that's translated rabble or riffraff as this mixed multitude. They're the ones. So if you read it that way in verse 4, the mixed multitude of the non-Israelites that was among them had a strong craving, and the people of Israel also wept again and said, "Oh, that we had meat to eat." So it starts outside of the Israelite nation. I mean, these people they're traveling with the Israelites. They're a part of the I won't say a part of the congregation exactly, but it's something like that. But they're not actually a part of the family. They're not part of the line genetically. And it starts with them, but it spreads quickly to the actual Israelites. When did we see this kind of complaint from the Israelites before? Carrie?
Pretty much all the time when they left Egypt.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened multiple times, but that first time is right after they left.
But the thing I look at there is that they were also complaining before they left of being slaves under the Egyptian rule.
Yeah, yeah. They're extremely skilled at complaining, aren't they? Yeah.
I want to ask a clarifying question. And there, I can't think of anything that ever said they were prohibited from eating anything other than that.
Right, yeah. So the issue is not so much that they're not allowed to eat anything else, it's that they don't feel that they're able to. Now, they of course do have their livestock with them.
Right.
It's possible that, the misfortunes that have been mentioned might have something to do with, losing some of their livestock or something like that. We don't know. What we do know is that it's a group of more than 1 million people. It's hard for us to, numbers that big, when we're talking about people, don't really mean a whole lot to us. We kind of understand them mathematically, but what does it look like? Well, that's a different question. I think of it like, because I used to live in Nebraska, I pegged it at, well, it's like if the population of Omaha was on the move. That's an awful lot of people. You think about the amount of food that has to be consumed daily by the population of Omaha, and I mean not even just the city of Omaha, but the metro area. That's a lot of food. And so even if they do have their livestock, they're not able to, just kill and eat that because, well, they're going to need that maybe next week or next month. Jen?
So the manna that we're talking about in Exodus, has it just continued?
Yeah.
Okay, so okay, but so they're still getting the quail too?
Okay, so the manna, so back in Exodus chapter 16, or maybe it's in 17, but I think it's 16, God gives them manna, and then he also gives them quail.
Right.
It's not clear that he provides them that quail consistently.
Okay.
It's either a one-off or kind of a rarity. And then here they are, and they're complaining that, well, God's providing us with this manna and everything, but we want something more substantial than that. Okay, so Yeah, just after they had left Egypt, they were hungry and God fed them. Now, when they complained about being hungry after having left Egypt, and even using some of the same terminology, like, back in Egypt, we had fish and cucumbers and melons and leeks and onions and garlic. Okay, God provided food for them. Well, and that was his plan, really, all along. It's not like he just like, oh, wow, they don't have any food. What am I going to do? Of course, he knew this was going to happen. But he waited for them to see their hunger, to see their need to rely on him, and then he provided for them. Now, he is providing for them. They're getting manna every morning. And their attitude toward it is what they said in verse 6. Now our strength is dried up, and there is nothing at all but this manna to look at. So, why are they complaining when, they're obviously not dying of hunger. They've got the manna. They've got daily food. Right?
I mean, we don't eat the exact same thing every day. And it sounds like they've tried. How many different ways can we present this and, fix it? And they're just like, well, I'm out of ideas. I've done this for a year. I've tried all the different ways to prepare it. I need change. That's kind of how
Yeah, that's right. And Mallory points out in verses 8, it's just verse 8, they've gone through all of these different ways to try to process it. And they could just eat it directly as it was, but they have processed it and tried to make something different with it because we like variety. We don't like this sort of constant drone of the same thing on and on and on. We like variety in our own diets, and we're typically not satisfied with not being hungry. We just like food. That's why we've gotten such an astonishing variety of restaurants out there. We can go for this style of food or that style of food, and there's all different kinds of recipes. The number of recipes that's available on the internet, I think, is roughly the same as the number of people in the world. It's just astonishing how much you can find out there to try to come up with different ideas, different ways to arrange the same ingredients to get something that tastes good that we like. All of this is icing on the cake. Because, we've got the food. We're not going hungry. We're just not satisfied. And that's what's going on with the Israelites. They've got the food, but they're saying, that's not good enough, God. We want something else. We want something better. We want some meat. We want something that we're going to enjoy. And of course, also, they're looking back at Egypt and going, look at all of the variety of things that were available in Egypt, and we miss that. And God never takes too kindly to that attitude. Let's keep reading. Kayla, can you take verses 10 through 15, please? Tell me what.
Moses heard the people weeping throughout their hands, everyone at the door of his tent. And the anger of the Lord blazed hotly, and Moses was displeased. Moses said to the Lord, why have you dealt down with your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight, that you lay the burden of all this people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth, that you should say to me, carry me in your bosom, as a nurse carries a nursing child, to the land that you swore to give their fathers? Where am I to get meat to give all these people? For they meet before me and say, give us meat, that we may eat. I am not able to carry all these people alone. The burden is too heavy for me. If you will treat me like this, kill me at once. If I find favor in your sight, that I may not see my wretchedness.
Thank you. All right. Number 2, what did Moses tell God was too burdensome? Misty?
He's almost complaining about leading them. He kind of, almost like a parent.
Okay, so we've got the Israelites complaining in a very childish way, and then Moses is complaining about having to deal with their childishness. And the way that he goes about it seems pretty melodramatic, doesn't it? And it's hard for me to read this and see anything else. Why is he, so upset over this complaint? Give us meat. It's not like he's never dealt with them complaining before. Okay.
I think to some degree he recognizes situation for what it is. And that, yeah, just in that this is all things considered, this is a relatively frivolous complaint. And considering everything they've gone through the previous several chapters where there's, they have a law, they have a covenant, they have a priesthood, all these things are being stood up to make a nation out of them. And they are very, like, almost literally navel-gazing and complaining about things that are literally right in front of them.
Yeah, so we were describing this, or we were comparing this to the way that our children sometimes complain about frivolous things. Moses is doing the same thing. He is referring to them as children. Look at what he said here in verse 12. Did I conceive all these people? Did I give them birth that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a nursing child? They're children, and there's over 1 million of them. I can't handle this many children. I've got a lot of kids. It's difficult to deal with all of them. I can't imagine having this many grown people who are behaving still like children. It's extremely frustrating. So it's not that this one complaint was enough for Moses to say, all right, I can't handle this. I can't handle this. They're asking for me. It's too much. It's ridiculous. It's the straw that broke the camel's back more than anything else. I can't believe they're still doing this stuff. I've had enough. Yeah.
What? And that was gonna be my point. It's like he just basically found out how many people he has around him, or he's overly looking at. Well, I mean, over 1 million people. I mean, he maybe didn't know that before, and they're complaining, and they've been spoon-fed for how long, and they just want more spoon-fed things given to them. And it's like he's done.
He's saying nothing's ever good enough for
Right.
these people.
Right.
I've done this for them, and he's not saying it's all about me. I've done this, God has done this, we together have done this and this and this and this and this. I've rescued them from the wrath of God. How many times? I just had to rescue them from the wrath of God when they were complaining and God sent fire, and I prayed to intercede for them. The next thing I know, they're saying, yeah, but the food's not good enough. I'm done. In his frustration, what would he prefer?
Sound like death.
He would prefer death. Now, think about the fact that he's over 80. Essentially, I'm thinking of this as, this really old guy going, I'm way too old to deal with this nonsense. I am long past that part of my life. Just get me out of here. Misty, you had your hand up earlier?
I'm gonna say, we look at this because we read it and it sounds like one complaint, but you gotta realize it's probably 100,000 people, 1 million different people coming up to him one at a time. Like drip, drip, drip of the water going down. Each child coming to you with the same complaint over and over. That's gotta be wearing.
Yes. Yeah, it'll wear you down. It'll wear you down when it's 5 kids. It'll wear you down when it's 1 million kids, for sure. Let's read on. Sammy, can you take verses 16 through 23, please?
And the Lord gave unto Moses, the Lord said unto Moses, gather unto me 70 men, the elders of Israel, whom thou knowest, the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them to the tabernacle of the congregation, that they may stand there with you. And I will come down and talk with you there, and I will take of the Spirit which is upon you, and will put it upon them. And they shall bear the burden of the people with you, and you bear it not yourself alone. And say unto the people, sanctify yourselves against tomorrow, and you shall eat flesh, for you have wept in the ears of the Lord, saying, who shall give us flesh to eat? For it was well with us in Egypt. Therefore the Lord will give you flesh, and you shall eat. You shall not eat 1 day, nor 2 days, nor 5 days, neither 10 days, nor 20, but even a whole month, until it come out of your nostrils, and it be loathsome unto you, because you have despised the Lord which is among you, and have wept before him, saying, why come forth out of Egypt? And Moses said, the people among whom I am are 600,000 footmen, and thou hast said, I will give them flesh, and they may eat a whole month. Shall the flocks and the herds be slain for them to suffice them? Or shall all the fish of the sea be gathered together for them to suffice them? And the Lord said unto Moses, is the Lord's hand become short, thou shalt see now whether my word shall come to pass.
All right, thank you. So how did God feel about Moses' frustration?
Well, enough to give him help. I mean, he was, okay, well, he had devised a plan.
Yeah, he's quite understanding with Moses. He doesn't directly respond to. I mean, he does direct. He doesn't directly address Moses' complaints. That's what Moses is doing. People complain to Moses. Moses is complaining to God, and it's almost as if God is saying, "Yeah, what do you think I've been dealing with this whole time? Join the club. I was ready to be done with these people back on the mountain when they created this golden calf. You're the one who put a stop to that, Moses." And now you're tired of it, and you wanted me to just go ahead and kill you. Well, how do you think I felt? So he completely understands. He feels the same way, and he is willing to give Moses some help. Number 3. Oh, I'm sorry, Mallory.
Good question. What happened to the process that his father-in-law had him put in place?
We're about to. We'll come back to that in 2 seconds.
My
Second question.
I also feel like God can tell the difference between, like, there's complaining just for the sake of complaining, which is what I feel like the Israelites were doing, and then there's complaint from Moses versus, like, I need help, and this is how I'm going to ask for help, and it may not be the most elegant way to ask for help, and I feel like God's reaction to those 2 different ways indicates, and for us to be able, when we're listening to somebody, are they complaining just because they're complaining, or are they complaining, and that's their way of their seeking help, like, and then how they respond to whatever help you give them, that, shows a bigger thing, but I don't, yes, we're not supposed to do complaining, but I don't think that complaining is like a very broad umbrella, and you have, like, how people can communicate sometimes comes across that way, maybe they're just seeking for somebody to either commiserate with them or help them.
The attitude behind it makes a huge difference. And we see that as parents. God certainly takes that into account. The example that sticks with me the most, and it's not exactly about complaining, but it's a very similar dynamic, I guess, is when God is telling Zechariah about the birth of John the Baptist, that his 80-year-old wife is going to conceive and have a child who's going to be a prophet. And then shortly after that, so he sends Gabriel to tell Zechariah that. He sends Gabriel to tell Mary that she is going to become pregnant, even though she's on the opposite end of the spectrum of being completely unable to conceive. And they both ask the same question: how is this going to happen? And yet the response is very different. To Zechariah, it's, what's your problem? Okay, if you don't believe me, I'm going to strike you mute until such time as the child is born, because you need to be taught a lesson. Mary asks the same question: how's this going to happen? But her attitude is different. Her attitude isn't doubting, it's just, tell me more. How is this going to happen? I want to understand. And Gabriel just tells him. Yeah, simple enough. Here's what's going to happen. The Holy Spirit is going to, is going to conceive this child within your womb, and you're going to bear a son. So the spirit behind it makes a huge difference. Misty?
Just one thing to notice when you read Moses' complaint versus the people, one comes across as entitled, one comes across as very frustrated.
Yeah. So the legitimate and the illegitimate. Okay, so to get to your first question, I guess it was, haven't we seen something like this 70 elders situation previously? I mean, back in Exodus chapter 18, and we did the number 70 wasn't involved there, but as Mallory points out, Jethro said, look, you're killing yourself here. You need to delegate. And so he says, why don't you divide these people up, select chiefs over families, over clans, over tribes, and then have them report to you. And if there's something they can't handle, they'll bring it to you, but you're wearing yourself and the people out trying to deal with everything yourself. On top of that, in Exodus 24, when the covenant is being confirmed after God has given the first portion of the law to Moses, he says, bring the 70 elders up to onto the mountain? Yeah, onto the mountain, and they sort of have a little feast to the Lord with Moses, Aaron, and the 70 elders. And then here we are again, and it's like the same 70 elders are here, but what's going on? Misty?
And maybe this is part of the difference. I don't know if the first time was 70, because like you said, it doesn't mention it. But in this particular case, it's like he's going to give some of the Lord to them as well. That's probably not the right way to word it. Whereas before, they were just appointed to help, but not necessarily having some sort of divine portion with that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So first of all, when Jethro makes a suggestion and Moses implements it, that's not part of God's arrangement of the polity. That's just an expedient. Like, well, we obviously need some form of delegation and accountability, so let's do it this way. Fine. Okay. How well does it work? I don't know. It seems to be an improvement on the status quo, but they don't have the kind of, well, they don't have the spirit of the Lord. Okay, and that's what God says He's going to provide in a smaller measure for these elders, and then they're going to be more capable. They're going to be more helpful. They're going to be hopefully able to stamp out some of this complaining and deal with a lot of these problems with God's help instead of it all always going all the way up to Moses. Good.
Could it also be that the people are like, well, I'm not going to go to that elder. He has no power. I'm just going to surpass him
Yeah.
and go to Moses, which is why, like, even if these things are in place, people aren't going to respect the order of things because they're like, well, that person, well, why do I need to take my person that far? They're still going to have to go to Moses, so I'll just skip the middle person. I'll take it to them. My own. And so now God's like, okay, fine, I will literally relieve some of this pressure off of Moses, because even then, Moses is still going to have 70 people coming to him about, like,
Yeah. And there are still going to be plenty of times coming up, including very soon, when the people complain and it falls on Moses again. So it's like, I mean, we don't know how much we don't read about. We don't know how many problems were popping up and were getting solved among this more than 1 million people on a regular basis, even a daily basis, and how much that was improved by each of these steps that are put in place, including by God here to help out with this load that is on Moses' shoulders. Number 4, getting back to the complaint at hand, how much meat would the Lord give the Israelites to eat?
1 month. A month worth.
Yeah, so that's the nice portion. And then you can tell that he's pretty irritated with them as he continues to say, yeah, you're not going to eat for a day or a week, you're going to eat for a month. It's going to be coming out of your nostrils and you're going to hate it. You're going to be so sick and tired of this meat that you have requested, that you have complained for. So God is giving them what they want. They've asked for meat, they have demanded meat, and he's giving it to them. But now what's God's attitude about it?
He's angry.
Sorry?
He's angry.
Yeah, he is quite mad at them for their bad attitude. I think there's perhaps a lesson for us in this, considering what we're praying for. Now, that doesn't mean that you should just never request anything from God because we don't want to make him mad. But think about what you're asking for and why you're asking. This is kind of what James is talking about in James chapter, I can't remember if it's the beginning of chapter 3 or the beginning of chapter 4, but it's one of those two. You complain that you don't have things, well, you didn't ask. And then you do ask for it, and you don't get it because you're asking in order to spend it on your own lusts. That's not a good motivation. Well, sometimes God actually will give you what you ask for, even though you're asking for it to use it on your own lusts. But it's not going to help. In fact, it's a form of punishment, giving you what you have requested that wasn't actually good for you. So that's what happens here. He's quite upset with them. Consider what you're asking for and why. In verses 24 through 30, the elders are assembled as, it's kind of going back and forth between the quail and the elders thing for a little while. The elders are assembled, they're given the Spirit, as I said, we're not going to read that portion. And then we'll pick up, Kevin, can you read verses 31 through 35, please?
What did you say about
Numbers 11, 31 through 35, please.
Now the Lord sent a wind that brought quail from the sea and let them fall all around the camp. For miles in every direction there were quail flying about 3 feet above the ground. So the people went out and caught quail all that day and throughout the night, and all the next day too. No one gathered less than 50 bushels. They spread the quail all around the camp to dry. But while they were gorging themselves on the meat, while it was still in their mouths, the anger of the Lord blazed against the people, and he struck them with a severe plague. So that place was called Gibraltar, which means graves of bleeding. Because they were buried the people who had craved meat from Egypt. From Kilbrode, the Israelites traveled to Hazeroth, where they stayed for some time.
All right, thank you. Number 5, how deep were the quail that fell around the camp? There's also, so there's a couple of different interpretations of the text. It's not clear. So Kevin's translation made it, went one of those directions. Most of the others would go in the other direction. How deep were they, or how high were they flying around over the ground?
3 feet.
Yeah, about 3 feet, 2 cubits. And so all these quail come regardless. It's a huge number of quail. And what do the people do? Misty?
They don't go just catch enough to eat, but they catch it over abundance, because it says nobody gathered less than 10 homers, I think 50 or 60 bushels. So I mean, that's a lot of quail per person.
That is a ton. Well, not literally a ton, but it is a lot of quail. Way more than they need, way more than they're going to be able to preserve long enough to eat it, or even to preserve it quickly enough for, the rest of it to not go bad while they're trying to preserve this over here. It's crazy. So it's like a feeding frenzy, and they're gorging themselves, and they're taking steps as if they're going to continue to gorge themselves forever on this meat that God has given them. Why did God send a plague on them for eating the food that he provided? No?
Because they didn't remember, their senses. They were just eating with their stomachs. It's because I guess I was thinking when it said a day's journey, it's, a couple cubits feet high, but it goes on deep. You can't eat all that.
Yeah.
No matter how many people you can't eat all that. It would be ridiculous to try to eat all of that. And they would be ridiculous. They still can't even see their own ridiculousness. And so that's why.
Yeah, so this kind of highlights the magnitude of their hunger isn't the right word. Their appetite, their craving, to go back to the terminology beginning of chapter 11 here. I mean, 10 homers, it is roughly in the neighborhood of 400 gallons. This is a lot of quail. And let's remember, they had the manna. It's not as if this is the first food that they have seen in weeks. They've got the manna. They just ate manna this morning. It's there for them. They even mentioned that earlier. So it's not that they're hungry exactly. It's the craving. This is gluttonous lust. And God is not happy with that. So as they go to this absurd length of, like Mallory said, they're just completely leaving their senses in order to try to satisfy their fleshly appetites. Well, yeah, of course God's upset. He's trying to teach them a lesson, and they are not really even paying attention to it, and they're just stuffing their faces to their own hurt. Okay, let's get into chapter 12. Where are we? Andrew, can you take verses 1 through 9, please?
Miriam and Aaron criticized Moses because of the Cushite women he married. He had married a Cushite woman. They said, "Does the Lord speak only through Moses? Does he not also speak through us?" When the Lord heard it, Moses was a very humble man, more so than anyone on the face of the earth. Suddenly the Lord said to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, "You three come out of the tent of meeting." So the three of them went out. Then the Lord descended in a pillar of cloud, stood at the entrance to the tent, son of Aaron and Miriam. When the two of them came forward, he said, "Listen to what I say. There is a prophet among you from the Lord. I make myself known to him in a vision. Speak with him in a dream." Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my household. I speak with him openly and not in riddles. He sees the form of the Lord. So why were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? The Lord's anger burned against him and he wept.
All right, thank you. Number 6, for what reason did Miriam and Aaron speak out against Moses in chapter 12?
Jealousy.
Yeah, essentially that's what it comes down to. The stated reason is because of the Cushite woman whom Moses had married, which raises its own questions, but we only have 5 minutes, so we're not going to go into it. Ultimately, it comes down to whether that's the excuse or whether that's more tied up with it. It comes down to jealousy. You can see this in Miriam's explanation. Has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he, I guess it's Aaron and Miriam said it, they said it. Has not he spoken through us also? Okay. Number 7, who was the most humble man on earth? Moses. Why is this important to note in this context? Matter?
He didn't seek this. He didn't seek to be this go-between person. He didn't want it.
Okay, so it's not that he's, trying to promote himself. It's not that he's being arrogant or trying to, domineer over anyone or anything like that. He's not being dismissive of Miriam and Aaron. This is just, well, God chose him for this position. So what do you want him to do about that? Side note, who wrote this down?
Moses.
Moses wrote that Moses was the most humble man on the face of the earth. What's going on here? How does that make any sense?
Well, that's what God said. He wrote down what God said.
Okay, so that is the short answer.
Yeah.
It's as simple as he's writing down what the Holy Spirit wants him to write down. Okay. We can go maybe a little bit deeper though, or you can get an answer that I think teaches us a lesson as well, though. God didn't choose Moses to lead the Israelites because he was so meek or so humble, and he didn't make Moses. He didn't, against Moses' will, make him humble. He didn't just happen to pick a guy who was super humble to lead the Israelites. It's the fact that Moses had this super close relationship with God that made him so humble. God spoke to him face to face. God doesn't use the visions and the intermediaries with Moses like he did with everybody else. And far from giving Aaron a reason to feel like, wow, I must be something super special, what that actually does is it humbles Moses. It helps him to see his own shortcomings. It helps him to see just how puny he is in comparison with God. And all he's doing is, because he has this super close relationship with God, he is correctly assessing his own, not just his own value, his own worth, but his own abilities, his own status. So yeah, he's able to say, there's nobody more humble than I am. And it's not because he's going, I am the most humble. Look at me. Of course not. He's saying, I stand in God's presence, and it's terrifying, and I'm tiny, and I don't feel like I deserve it. No one has been humbled more than I have. Mel?
Paul say, he was the greatest sinner. Or you're not.
Something like that, yeah.
You can't actually go out and measure these things.
Yeah.
You can't measure. Humility is not like on a scale, and you can't measure that. But
I don't know what the units would be.
But you can feel how humble you are. If there's somebody who feels more humble than I am, I would love to meet that person, kind of thing, right? And that's how I also felt about Saul. He's like, you'd be hard pressed to find someone who has more than I do.
Yeah. Okay, we are about 2 minutes from the end here, so I'm going to have to see what we can skip from my copious notes. We don't have time to read verses 10 through 16, but I trust that you've read it already. Number 8, what happened to Miriam because of her murmuring against God?
Leprosy.
She was struck with this leprosy. And so, of course, Moses gloated and said, serves you right. What did you expect? What did he actually do? He prayed for her to be healed.
And why did Aaron get off?
Good question. What?
Like, I mean, he did with the golden calf. I mean, it's all-
Yeah, he's worked through about 7 of his 9 lives. Right?
yeah.
Okay. What do you guys think? Why doesn't Aaron get the same treatment? I mean, he's just as much a part of this as Miriam.
It's because priests.
That's most likely the reason. If he is struck with leprosy, then everything with the tabernacle stops until he is made clean again. So to take this man who has been sanctified, who is made holy, and then make him very unholy would make him completely unfit to serve in this capacity. So it's one of those, it's not exactly a technicality, but it's one of those, you just picture a guy going, man, if you weren't high priest. Number 9, last question, where did the people camp after leaving Hazeroth?
Brand, where's the brand?
Okay, so where are they headed? You look at that on the map. Sorry?
To the promised land?
Yeah, that's it's up toward the north of the Sinai Peninsula. They're on the move, as I said at the beginning. They're getting ready. God is getting them ready for the next chapter. He's getting ready to give them the promised land. And that's where we will leave it for tonight. Thank you.
They're not going to this one. It's over here. Could be. I think he usually swayed. Swayed to build a golden calf. Swayed. He was just-
Yeah, I always look at city of
Howdy. So how long have you been lonely for?
moving around. How big? Did a show on Chris.
Oh, yeah.
Horse in New York City. In New York City. It's got a hot dog vendor.
Good. So the church was gonna do it.
We didn't know.
Do they just tear, do they tear, do they cut it? And so she's gonna do that? Wow.
They haven't done that way.
Yeah, yeah. I just wish there was, I wish they had things like that. Did you do it here? Yeah, well, I'm sure.
Good evening. If you're using a songbook and want to mark it for the invitation song, it'll be 8:35. Dan's going to bring us the invitation tonight. To start us off here, we'll sing 589. I want to be a worker for the Lord, to love and trust His holy word, to sing and pray and be busy every day,
To see so many here at midweek, I wanted to take a look at a couple of sections of passages tonight before that final song and closing prayer. Go ahead and turn to Genesis 17 quickly. Genesis 17 is doing some reading recently. Somebody referenced this set of passages about the birth of Isaac, and then they had some things to say about it later. So I wanted to quickly revisit those with the group here to get us started again. Genesis 17, take a look with me, starting in verse 15 there. And God said to Abraham, "As for Sarai your wife, you shall not call her her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. I will bless her, and also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall become a mother of nations. Kings of peoples shall be from her." Abraham fell on his face and laughed, and said in his heart, "Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child?" Abraham said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." So that references there kind of the God's promise regarding Isaac, and we'll say the challenging earthly circumstances surrounding that birth of Isaac. We've covered this before. This is nothing new, obviously. Genesis 21, in the second chapter there, or in the second verse there, we see this promise come to fruition. "For Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time of which God had spoken to him." So the promise is fulfilled. Abraham and Sarah have a son together, even at their advanced age. I wanted to consider tonight the command that Abraham is later given to sacrifice Isaac. The birth of Isaac is significant not just because of the age of Abraham and Sarah, but because this was something that they had longed for and had been promised to them, and they had been long suffering in this to the point that they try to take matters into their own hands surrounding the whole birth of Ishmael. So again, this is their son, obviously someone they care for very greatly, someone that has been greatly anticipated, someone they care for a lot. Read with me then in Genesis 22. This is kind of the main thrust, and then we will go from there. We'll just quickly read here the first 13 verses out of 22. Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. Then he said, Take now your son, go, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son, and he split the wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place which God had told him. And on the 3rd day Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said to his young men, Stay here with the donkey, the lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we shall come back to you. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son, and he took fire in his hand and a knife, and the 2 of them went together. But Isaac spoke to Abraham his father and said, My father. And he said, Here I am, my son. Then he said, Look, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? Abraham said, My son, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering. So the 2 of them went together. Then they came to a place of which God had told him. Abraham built an altar there and placed the wood in order, and he bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. Then Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, Here I am. And he said, Do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear your God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Then Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and there was behind him a ram caught in the thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up for a burnt offering instead of his son. There's 2 phrases in that section of reading we look at, and we use those as tells, and we say that Abraham somehow knew, or at least was greatly confident, that he wasn't actually going to be required to offer Isaac. Right? When he tells the young men who were traveling with him that the boy and I will be back, and then later on, when he is explaining to Isaac that God will provide for himself the lamb. Generally we look at that and we take that to mean that maybe Abraham was willing, but seems like he has this figured out, or at least he's like strongly suspicious that God is going to somehow intervene. Maybe that's true, maybe it isn't, right? But, based on the conclusion there in verses 12 and 13, Abraham is commended pretty clearly, and it is plainly said that, they know that he was willing to do this, that he was willing to offer up his own son, and he's commended for that. And so, it's not required of him. So like I said, had been doing some reading here recently. You often see this set of passages pointing forward. They make comparisons to God being willing to offer his own son. You'll also find, if you look far enough, you'll find some skeptics who argue that if God was going to intervene on Abraham and Isaac's behalf, then maybe he somehow intervened for Christ too. That somehow, Christ sacrificing himself, maybe it wasn't as bad as we make it out to be, right? That maybe somehow God shielded Jesus somehow from the worst of that situation. So let's take a couple of minutes, flip forward to Matthew. We'll do a little reading out of there and try to put those claims to the test. With me, please join in Matthew 26. Matthew 26, starting in, should be verse 36. Here it is.
Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to the disciples, "Sit here while I go and pray over there." And he took with him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, "My soul is exceedingly sorrow, even to death. Stay here and watch with me." He went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, "Oh, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." Just a small little slice out of that account. Why is it included? Right, what is it telling us? These are not uncommon passages. If you've read them before, if you're familiar with them, and I ask that question, like, so what? Why is this included? What should we get out of it? You're going to say something along the lines of, like, well, it humanizes Jesus, right? It shows us, that he was not just deity, that he had earthly, physical sorts of concerns as well. True. But if you don't know much about the sacrifice of Christ, if you don't know much about this whole story that many of us are very, very familiar with, then, right, this is illustrating something much more vivid to you, right? This intense foreboding that he is demonstrating here. He's not just politely asking if there's an alternative. Let's hash it out, right? This is he talks about being greatly distressed here, if it is possible. Again, knowing who he is speaking to, knowing, in the adult class, all this time we have spent talking about Moses and, the right ways and wrong ways to be speaking of God. Christ certainly knowing these things, he's asking God, are there any outs, right? Is there any alternative here? Is there any other path at all, right? What that shows us then is that everything up to this point, but also after this point, it was all real. Wasn't lessened, wasn't reduced, right? Again, if you already know this and you already believe in Christ, then you're thinking, yes, obviously, Dan, we all agree on this point. But again, if you were on the fence, right? If you're someone who is hearing this for the first time, or someone who has some skepticism, some concerns, right? Including this in Jesus's story, in his narrative, right? Helps to demonstrate that this was a real and significant sacrifice on his part. It wasn't just inconvenient. It wasn't just unpleasant, right? It was something deeply disturbing to a person who was willing to say hard truths, who was willing to face down mobs, who was willing to perform miracles, not, for himself, but for the benefit of others, right? Somebody who has lived a rather extraordinary earthly life up to this point. And when he gets to this hour, he's asking for himself, and he's asking for any sort of an out, knowing ultimately what that answer is. He knows there aren't any outs. He knows he has to go through this, and he knows it is going to be awful physically, mentally, and emotionally. So, saying that, again, this little section of verses here, when it's included, that it humanizes Jesus, right? I don't disagree with that, but I think we're selling it short, right? That is a very dry and starchy academic sort of a thing to say, right? So that's not what we're here to do tonight, right? We are not here as part of a book club. We are not here to conduct a literary review of this text, right? I'm here to ask just a couple more questions this evening, right? If we look at this small part of Jesus's account, knowing what else we know from reading further on about him, right? Do we accept this notion, right, that an innocent man had a sham trial, that he was put to death, not for his own wrongdoing, but for something that we did, that you did, that I did? That he knew these things were going to happen to him, and he was still willing to go along with it, even though, as we just saw demonstrated here, it was not something he was looking forward to. It's not something that was in any way lessened on him. And if you accept that all of this is true, what are you going to do about it? That thought is uncomfortable. That thought should propel us to do something. If you have responded to this gospel call before, then take, just a minute here and think, right? Really think about whether you are making the most of your time, right? Jesus died so that you could live, right? Are you honoring that sacrifice in your daily life, right? That is more than just not doing bad things. It's more than just avoiding sin. That's the starting point for sure. If there are any sources of sin, known or secret or whatever else that you're carrying around, those things need to be rooted out, right? That's kind of step zero. That's the basic thing here. That's something we can pray with you, we can pray for you about. That offer is certainly available, but I want to make sure that you're being proactive too, that you are seeking opportunities, again, not just to avoid the bad things, but also to really live for Christ, to be seeking to spread his kingdom on the earth in a way that we all agree to, but is hard to actually seek out. And if you haven't responded to that same gospel call, what better time than now? Everything is ready. Everyone here would encouragement. It is a big commitment, but the hardest part, right, the part that Jesus had to do, that's already done. All you need to do is accept it and respond to it. Consider these things, if you would, while we all stand and while we sing.
The fountain reaches for you and me. Let the faithful haste to it bring. 'Tis the fount of love from the source above, and he bids us all freely drink. And free, when you found tis for you and me. There's his heart to soul, hear the welcome call, hear the fountain open for all. There's a living stream with a crystal gleam from the throne of life now it flows. While the waters roll, let the weary soul hear the call and forth freely go. Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? It's for you and me. Thirsty soul, hear the welcome call. 'Tis the fountain open for all. There's no rock and no soul is up that united to all your share. 'Tis for you and me, the stream I see. Let us sing joyfully there. Will you come to the fountain free? Will you come? 'Tis for you and me. Thirsty soul, hear the welcome call. 'Tis the fountain open for all. I want to thank Dan for the invitation tonight, Jeremy for our class as well. It's good to see everyone out this evening. We were late. I missed all the announcements, so I don't have much to say. But if anybody else has any announcements, this would be a good time. Go ahead, Brian.
Denise is not with us. We have to take it to the ER. Scratch on you or something. So we have to attend to that. But she's at home now.
Okay, let's keep her in our thoughts. I know our family's going to be going out of town this weekend, so we won't be here Sunday. Anybody else? If not, we'll have our closing prayer.
Let's pray. Our great God in heaven, we come to you now and just thank you so much for this time that you've blessed us with. We pray that we've had a fruitful evening and that we take the lessons that we've heard tonight and apply them to our lives, that we will be better servants for you. We pray to God that you be with those of our number who are not with us, those going through physical ailments. We just pray that you will restore their health and bring them back to us quickly. We also pray that you be with those who are traveling. We pray that they have safe travels home as well. And dear God, we thank you so much for all that you've given to us. We recognize that you are the creator and giver of all that we have. And we just praise you for that and recognize that all has come from you. We pray that you be with us now as we separate and pray for safe travels home and back at the next appointed time if it be in your will. And pray these things through Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.